Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on your door politely or leave you time to prepare. It slips in quietly, through a kiss, a smile, a suitcase left half open on the bed. I stood there that night, leaning against the doorframe, watching my wife, Lauren, pack for her trip. She folded one of her sundresses carefully, smoothing it out like she was already imagining herself wearing it on the beach. "You're really excited about this, huh?" I said, trying to sound lighthearted. Lauren glanced up, her blue eyes meeting mine, and smiled, just a little too quickly. "Of course I am. It's been years since I had a trip like this. You'll be okay with the kids, right? I told you not to worry." I walked over, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "It's just 5 days. You've earned it." And I meant that. After 10 years of marriage, Lauren was still my partner, my best friend. I trusted her with my life. Why wouldn't I? The next morning, I carried her suitcase to the car and watched her drive off, her hand waving out the window. "Love you," she called. I smiled and waved back, not knowing those would be the last words she said to me before the truth turned my world upside down. Lauren's trip to Cancun had been a blur of pictures and updates. Each message she sent me carefully curated to show nothing but fun. Beach photos, margaritas, sunsets. She was living it up, sending me texts that sounded carefree and perfect. "Wish you were here," she'd say, and I'd smile, feeling content knowing she was happy. But that all changed when she came back. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just the typical post-vacation blues. She seemed a little quieter than usual, more withdrawn, but I chalked it up to jet lag. The kids were back to their usual routine, and I tried to focus on the day-to-day, but something was nagging at me. We sat on the couch a few nights later, the kids tucked in bed, and she was scrolling on her phone again. I couldn't help but notice how she wouldn't meet my eyes. The air between us felt thicker. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but even I could hear the edge in my voice. She glanced at me quickly, almost defensively. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" She leaned over to kiss me, but it felt wrong. It wasn't the kiss of the woman I had been married to for years. It felt like a performance emotion she was going through. I pulled back, feeling a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. That night, I lay in bed beside her, her back turned to me. Sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about the way her phone never left her hand now, how she seemed distant, too distant. Had I missed something? Had I not been paying attention? My stomach churned, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wasn't right. 3 days later, my phone buzzed, tearing me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but I did. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "Is this Ethan?" "Yes, who's this?" I asked, my voice rising. "You might want to sit down for this," the voice said, and I instantly felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "I've got something you need to see." Before I could ask anything else, the phone went silent for a second before a message appeared on the screen. Attached were 2 photos. I opened them. My blood ran cold. The first photo was from a beach club in Cancun, Lauren laughing and sitting far too close to a man I didn't recognize. His arm was draped casually over her shoulder, and the smile on her face made my stomach twist. The second photo made my heart stop. Lauren was sitting on the man's lap, her body angled toward him, a look of familiarity that hit like a punch to the gut. Her face was tilted toward his, as if no one else existed in the world at that moment. Underneath the photos, the message read, "Thought you should know what your wife was up to in Cancun. You deserve better." I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. Questions flooded in, but none of them made sense. My wife, Lauren, had been in Cancun for 5 days, and in those 5 days, she crossed a line I could never come back from. I didn't know what to do next. My hands shook as I typed the only thing that made sense. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "Someone who thought you should know the truth. Meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll tell you everything. I'll send the location in the morning." I stared at the screen. The words, the photos, they were too real. This couldn't be a joke. I'd been betrayed. The waiting was unbearable. I spent the next day trying to focus on the kids, on work, but I could hardly concentrate. Every minute felt like an hour. And as 7 p.m. approached, a sense of urgency, took hold of me. What was I about to walk into? What other truths had I been blind to? At 6:30 p.m., my phone buzzed again. The message read, "Meet me at the old diner on Pine Street. I'll be in a booth by the window." I grabbed my jacket and left, not bothering to tell Lauren where I was going. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't stay here, not with the knot in my chest tightening with every breath. The drive felt endless. Pine Street was a ghost town, abandoned shops, the remnants of what used to be a bustling part of town. The diner stood like a relic, its neon sign flickering weakly against the darkness. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw only one car. My heart pounded as I got out and walked inside. The diner smelled of stale coffee and grease, the low hum of quiet chatter mixing with the clinking of cups and forks. I scanned the room, and then I saw her. Kara. I froze. Kara had been Lauren's best friend since college. She'd always been close to both of us, and I never suspected she'd be involved in any of this. She sat alone in a booth by the window, her phone in front of her, eyes locked on the screen. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes meeting mine. The expression she wore wasn't apologetic or regretful. It was almost relieved. "Ethan," she said softly, almost too softly. "I see you got my message." I stood frozen, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? Why was Kara here? Why did she have these photos? "You didn't have to do this," I said, my voice tight. "You didn't have to send me those photos." Kara leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. "You think I wanted to?" she asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "But there's more, Ethan. There's a lot more." I sat down across from her, the weight of the photos heavy in my mind, threatening to crush me. Kara slid her phone toward me, showing me more images, worse images. Lauren and the man from the photos, Adam, locked in a kiss, their bodies tangled in a way that made my blood run cold. She swiped to a video, and I couldn't bring myself to watch it. The images alone were enough. I looked away, my hands gripping the edge of the table, shaking. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" Kara's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "Because you deserve to know what's really been going on, Ethan. You deserve the truth, not the lies Lauren's been feeding you." I felt the floor beneath me shift, as if the ground itself had split open. "What do you mean? What else has been going on?" Kara exhaled sharply, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "Lauren's not the person you think she is, Ethan. She's been cheating on you for a while now. And not just with Adam." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, not just with him?" I demanded. "Who else?" Kara's eyes met mine with a mixture of sadness and bitterness. "She's been seeing Ryan. For months. Maybe longer. He's the one she's been meeting up with when you're at work, or when you're with the kids." The words hit me like a freight train. Ryan. My wife had been seeing someone else, and it wasn't just some random fling. I struggled to stay calm, my hands clenched beneath the table. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Kara looked down at her hands, her voice quiet. "I didn't want to tear everything apart. I didn't want to hurt you. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. You deserve better than this." I stood up suddenly, my mind spinning, my heart breaking. "I need to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Kara nodded, her face a mask of guilt and sorrow, but I didn't have the energy to comfort her. I turned and left the diner, my mind consumed by the images, by the lies. How long had Lauren been keeping this from me? How had I been so blind? I got in my car and drove, the miles passing by like I was in some kind of trance. I couldn't stop seeing it. The way Lauren had looked at Adam, the way she had kissed him. The video. Ryan. Everything had changed. And now I had to face the truth. The drive back home felt like a lifetime. The hum of the engine was the only thing grounding me, but the words Kara had told me, the images she'd shown me, those haunted every inch of my mind. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Lauren had been seeing Ryan behind my back for months. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When I got home, the house was still, too quiet. Lauren's car was parked in the driveway, and I could see the faint glow of a light on in the kitchen. She was there, waiting for me to return, just like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had changed. I walked inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I stepped through the door, her eyes brightening in that way they always did when she saw me. "Hey, babe," she said softly, a smile pulling at the corners of her lips. But I wasn't fooled. Something about her smile now felt like a mask. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at her. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk?" Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, setting her phone down and folding her hands in front of her. "Sure. What's wrong?" I walked closer, my gaze never leaving hers. "Don't act like everything's normal, Lauren. I know what you've been doing." Her face went pale, and I saw the moment the truth hit her. Her eyes flickered toward the phone she'd left on the table, then back to me, but she didn't speak. "Do you want me to show you the pictures?" I asked, my voice cold, my jaw clenched. "Or should I remind you about Ryan?" Her breath hitched. "Ethan, please." "Don't please me, Lauren." I cut her off, stepping closer. "I've been played for a fool for months, and you think you can just talk your way out of it?" Her face crumpled, and she stood up, reaching for me like she wanted to explain, to make it all better. But the truth was already there, hanging between us, suffocating everything in its path. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because you've been sneaking around with 2 men, Lauren? That sounds pretty intentional to me." She winced at the sharpness in my tone, but I wasn't done. "Do you really think I'm that stupid? Do you think I wouldn't find out?" Her hands trembled as she wiped at her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake. A mistake," I repeated bitterly. "You don't get to call it a mistake when you've been lying to me for months, sleeping with Ryan, and then kissing Adam in Cancun like I'm some kind of fool." The words hit her like a slap, and she collapsed into the chair, sobbing quietly. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not now. Not after everything. "You've destroyed everything, Lauren. Our marriage. Our family," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. "And for what? For what?" She sniffled, still trying to speak through the tears. "I wasn't happy, Ethan. I don't know what happened. I wanted something more. I was lost." "You're lost?" I shot back, incredulous. "You've been lost for months, Lauren. But I have been here, right here, picking up the pieces while you've been out there with him." I paused, my breath ragged. "I gave you everything. My trust, my love. And you threw it all away for what?" "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was too late for apologies. Too late for explanations. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady but final. Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, as though she couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. "What?" "Ethan, no, please, let's try to work through this. We can go to therapy. We can fix this." "No," I said, cutting her off. "There's nothing to fix anymore. You've destroyed everything. This isn't something we can work through." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel a thing. "Please, Ethan," she begged, reaching for me. "I love you. I need you." I shook my head, the words stinging my chest. "You don't love me, Lauren. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have betrayed me." I could see the guilt and regret written across her face, but it didn't matter. Nothing would ever be the same. I had to leave her. I had to walk away from the woman I thought I knew, from the woman I had trusted with my whole heart. I stood up, my legs shaky as I turned toward the door. "I'm done, Lauren. We're done." And with that, I walked out of the house. The next few weeks were a blur. The divorce papers were filed, and I moved into an apartment in the city. The kids were confused and heartbroken, and Lauren tried, desperately, to convince me to come back. But I was resolute. I couldn't undo what she'd done, and I wasn't going to let her think she could manipulate me back into her life with more apologies and empty promises. As I sat in my apartment, staring out the window at the city below, I felt lost. But there was one thing that kept me grounded: revenge. I didn't want to just walk away. I wanted her to understand the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to feel what I had felt. The pain, the betrayal, the crushing weight of realizing that the woman you trusted most in the world was the one who tore your heart apart. I spent the next few weeks building my plan. Slowly, methodically. Every move I made would have a purpose, and it would all lead back to one thing: her. She had to pay for what she'd done, for the lies, for the betrayal, and I would make sure she regretted it every day for the rest of her life. The first step in my revenge was simple. I needed to get the full scope of Lauren's life, the people she worked with, the friends she'd kept, the connections she'd made. I needed to see where her walls were weakest. I started with her job. Lauren had worked as an event planner for a high-profile firm, and she had always prided herself on her reputation. I knew she would fight to protect her career, so that's where I would start. I made a few phone calls, did some research, and found a few details that could destroy her professional life. I knew her boss would be receptive to a well-placed anonymous tip. Her extramarital affair, the lies she told about her time away, and the way she had compromised her own professional integrity. The tip would come from an anonymous source. Me. And with it, her career would start to crumble. The tip I'd sent to Lauren's boss was carefully constructed, personal, detailed, and damning. I knew exactly how to get under her skin and make the walls she'd so carefully built around her life start to crumble. But I wasn't done yet. Lauren had always been proud of her professional life, her reputation, and her ability to juggle both family and career. I would make sure that all of it fell apart. The next few days were tense. I'd watch Lauren carefully, how she acted, the way she tried to salvage what was left of her dignity after I dropped the bomb. I could see the panic in her eyes when she came home that evening after receiving a call from her boss. She didn't even need to say a word. The guilt on her face told me everything I needed to know. I didn't feel pity for her. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just a cold, calculated sense of justice. What she had done was unforgivable, and the consequences were just beginning. Lauren tried to make excuses the following night, her voice trembling with the pressure of her unraveling life. "Ethan," she began, her hands nervously clutching her phone, "I don't know how this happened. I never meant for it to go this far." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I could see the panic and fear in her eyes. The woman who had been so confident, so in control of everything, now looked like a shell of herself. The damage was real now, and the weight of it was sinking in. "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" I repeated with a bitter laugh. "Lauren, do you realize how many lies you've told? How much you've hurt me and the kids? You thought you could just keep everything hidden. You thought you could just keep running away from the consequences." "I never wanted this," she said, her voice breaking. "I love you, Ethan. You have to believe me. I made a mistake. I made so many mistakes." "I'm sure you did," I said coldly. "But I'm not here to hear your excuses anymore. The damage is done, Lauren, and it's not just between us anymore." She flinched at the mention of us, her expression crumbling. I could see that she still thought she could salvage something, anything, but I wasn't interested in fixing what was broken. "Where's your pride now?" I asked, my voice low. "Where's the woman who told me she loved me, that we were a team?" "I am that woman," she whispered, her tears flowing freely. "But I don't know what happened. I don't know how I lost myself." "You didn't lose yourself, Lauren," I said, stepping closer, my voice low but unwavering. "You chose to betray me. You chose to throw everything away for a man who wasn't worth it." Her sobs were heartbreaking, but they weren't enough to make me feel anything. I'd already moved on. I'd already let go. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the air like ice. "I've given you enough chances. I'm done. I don't love you anymore, Lauren." The next few days passed in a blur of silence. Lauren continued to beg for forgiveness, to beg me to stay, but I had made my decision. I was done. She had crossed a line that I could never forgive, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. I watched as her professional life began to slip away. The anonymous tip had worked. Her boss called her into his office, and the fallout was immediate. Her colleagues avoided her, and whispers spread throughout the office like wildfire. The damage to her reputation was far-reaching. I had made sure of it, but that was just the beginning. Lauren wasn't the only one who needed to face the consequences. It was time to go after Ryan, the man who had been the other piece of the betrayal puzzle, the one who had been with her behind my back. I found Ryan through a few quick searches. He wasn't exactly hard to track down. His social media was full of photos that told the story of his life, and it didn't take much digging to uncover the lies he'd been living. I knew what I needed to do. I reached out to his employer first. I didn't need to go overboard, just enough to make sure he wouldn't feel so untouchable anymore. A simple call, a few well-placed words about his questionable activities. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to make him sweat. Ryan didn't know who had set the wheels in motion, but he would soon find out. The confrontation with Ryan came the following weekend. He was at a bar with some friends, his usual smug expression on his face. I walked in, my eyes scanning the room until I saw him. He was sitting at the bar talking to a group of guys, clearly the center of attention, as usual. I walked up to him, my steps purposeful, my anger now controlled and cold. "Ryan," I said, my voice calm but heavy with meaning. He turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw a recognition flicker in his eyes. He didn't know who had tipped off his boss yet, but I could tell he was nervous. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice dripping with that same arrogant confidence that made my blood boil. "You know what this is about," I said, my eyes narrowing. "And you know what you've done. You've destroyed a family, ruined a life, my life. Now it's time for you to pay." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What the hell are you talking about? What do you want?" I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had been wronged and was about to make sure the world knew it. "I've already done enough. You just don't know it yet." Ryan tried to push past me, but I stepped in his way, blocking his exit. "You're not going anywhere, Ryan. Not until I'm done." Over the next few weeks, I watched as Lauren and Ryan both spiraled. Lauren's career was in shambles. Her friends had turned their backs on her. And Ryan? Well, he was struggling to keep his job, as I'd made sure the whispers about his behavior grew louder. But the best part was the final blow. I had kept a record of everything. Emails, messages, conversations. The proof that Lauren and Ryan's affair had gone on for far longer than I had ever suspected. And now, I was going to make sure Lauren had to face the truth in front of everyone. One final confrontation. One last moment to watch them crumble. I sent Lauren an invitation to meet. It was simple. "Come to the place we first met. Let's talk." She showed up, looking weary, broken. The woman I once knew was gone, replaced by someone desperate, someone who had been caught. I didn't need to say much. I let the photos, the messages, the documents speak for themselves. I watched as the realization hit her. She had lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her family. But she couldn't deny it. Not anymore. When it was all over, I walked away with my head high. Lauren and Ryan were left to face the mess they'd made. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt peace. I had reclaimed my life. And in the end, that was all that mattered.